Hey everyone, it is Monday morning and we always kick off our week when we bring on our expert, Greg Dickerson. How you doing this morning, Greg?
I'm doing great. Michael, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful. So I wanted to open up a discussion with you and talk about, recessions are when real wealth is created, right? Over my lifetime, I've seen plenty of companies created in recessions. I've made personal strides, huge strides during recessions. And I wanted to bring this up because I think the second half of the year is going to be painful. I think the pain was successfully hidden or delayed in the first half. I'm just not sure we can do that again in the second half. And I think we're going to start to see cracks in pain. But I want people to realize where there is pain, there's also opportunity. So I thought I'd talk with that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a great conversation. And the interesting thing with all of it is we still don't know how deep this re-flare up is going to go. And then we're entering flu season and what that's going to do with everything. And
Yeah.
a lot of I'm in Virginia and we've been pretty mild, and we're our state's talking about going back into phase 2 from phase 3 of the reopening. So we're going backwards. So, GDP numbers are coming out, but yeah, let's get into it. It's hard to know what the real effects are going to be, going into the end, second half of the year here, and how bad things are going to be with shutdowns and all that.
Yeah. When I think about recessions, I always stay where I have history, right? So my first history through recessions, actually, I guess I have a couple. First several recessions, I was a kid, right? So under 18. And I experienced seeing my parents struggle, right? That would be in the 70s and 80s, right? And in that time frame,
how old are you?
So I'm 50 or 48. Sorry, 48.
50, 48. Okay.
Yeah. So what I remember is the Silicon Valley wasn't the Silicon Valley then, because I've always been here, but my dad getting laid off a bunch of times and looking for work. It wasn't a good time. Then when I graduate college and come out and the tech boom, we had a recession. And what I learned from that one is if you're innovative, a lot of great companies were created during that recession that are now behemoths. Amazon, is a huge example, right? But there's ways that you can develop new companies in recessions. And I think we're going to have a lot of that, right? I think a lot of these restaurant closures and retail closures are going to be traumatic and bad and blah, blah, blah. But I think there'll be some innovation, and retail and restaurants could be fundamentally different and more entertaining and more of an event. And who knows, but I mean, there could be some stuff there. And then obviously the real estate recession or depression, depending on how you want to call it, was a huge benefit for us. We were lucky enough to get out of an asset that was destroyed into apartments, which survived just fine. And then we bought hand over fist during the crash. So, I think there's a lot of potential coming up. And I think the second half is going to be bad. I think maybe the first half of next year is bad, but we will get through this. They don't last forever. And I just want people to realize not to get lost in the headlines, but, think about what's coming. So that's my experience.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I'm 53. So, what I remember about childhood is the lines at the gas station during the oil embargoes and all that going on. And
yeah,
I do remember that. The only economic crisis that I've been through as a entrepreneur was basically 2009, because prior to that was the S&L crisis, and I wasn't in business then. I don't even remember when that was and where I would have been. But the dot-com bubble and burst didn't affect me. I wasn't in stocks. I was in real estate early in my career when that 2001. So I was doing a lot of work for people that were taking money out of the market and buying houses and investing in properties down at the beach. So that was pretty interesting, because I'm like, where are you getting your money?
Stock market.
I just sold such and such a stock. I made a ton of money and I'm buying a beach house. It was really interesting. Those times. But on what you said in terms of innovation. So number one, wherever there's a problem, there's opportunity. Wherever there, use the word recession, there's always opportunities in every market and every cycle. It just depends on how you take advantage of that and how you're positioned to take advantage of it. Right now, we're in a melt up in terms of the markets and assets because of what the Fed is doing. And it's only because of what the Fed is doing. So you got to be very cautious, very careful in those areas and know when to get out. It's always best to know the top than the bottom. So when you're at the bottom, that's where the opportunities are created because there's problems, there's issues that need to be resolved. Now, what's really interesting about what you said in terms of innovation, so we're going to see consolidation in the retail, restaurant, office sector. You're going to see companies merging. You're going to see other companies buying other companies out of bankruptcy. You're going to see, people like me that are in equity capital. That's kind of what we're targeting is companies that are in bankruptcy and or, just that need cash infusions, bringing capital to the situation to help stabilize great companies. And you look at that on a large scale. Bill Ackman just raised a SPAC, special purpose acquisition company, $5 billion to go out and buy, a $10 billion company. And he's targeting a number of them.
Yeah,
and,
he says he says he's looking for a mature unicorn. That's what I heard him say. Sorry.
Yeah. And he's a unicorn in terms of what they've created in this new fund. It's the largest ever. So it'll be interesting to see what company they end up buying and targeting. My guess is it may be one that needs that support. So it could be distressed, although it may be disguised and packaged a little differently, because his whole business philosophy are simple, predictable businesses, easy, free cash flowing, businesses. But when you're opportunistic in terms of, what he does and how he does it, you're going to need to go into a distressed situation. So we're going to see some consolidation. We're going to see some of that. But here's the real interesting thing. Every company now is a tech company. Every one of them.
Yeah.
Restaurants, retail, office, everybody. Because what are they doing? They're all leveraging tech and operating differently now. Restaurants that didn't do, online ordering and curbside and all that had to switch to that model.
Yeah.
A lot of them have become a little bit more leaner, a little bit more efficient. Same thing with offices, same thing with retail in terms of how they're operating. So it'll be really interesting to see how technology changes the way every business operates moving forward, and especially in those consolidations and what the retail landscape looks like moving forward. Because, we had a very strong economy. Bad businesses can exist in a really great economy. So a lot of these companies that were kind of limping along, that weren't really great companies, they were just kind of being propped up by an overinflated economy. Those are kind of the ones that aren't going to make it through here. So we needed a little bit of, market efficiency, to take hold and, kind of transition. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. What are the technologies and what are the companies that are going to emerge out of this, 10 times stronger moving forward? And also the ones that are exiting are going to leave opportunities. In my town alone, there's probably 20 or 30 vacant, fully equipped restaurants right now that somebody could walk in and take over once this whole situation's done. So there's going to be, plenty of opportunities. You just got to look at them a little bit differently.
Yeah. And again, that's what I really want this conversation to be about is opportunities created out of the pain. And it's a tough topic because again, if you're feeling the pain as I did as a teenager, it sucks, right? You feel like you can't get away from it. But, as we're talking about it being investors and business owners and things of that nature, where there's pain, there's opportunity. And if you can solve a problem, your opportunities. And again, I think the problems, unfortunately, will be plentiful, right?
Yeah.
What do we do with big box retails? What do we do with office buildings? What do we do with, probably more development in the suburbs? I mean, I think it's clear. I mean, every day I'm hearing about more people leaving the big cities, right? I thought that was an interesting concept 6 weeks ago, but now it's like, holy shit, is the flood open? I mean, there are people going everywhere. So, I mean, it could just fundamentally change the landscape. And oh, by the way, realize as populations change. I mean, this just came to me, but the election could be totally different because people that used to be consolidated in big cities are now voting somewhere else. I mean, that just hit me right now because I think the suburbs, and again, I say space is good. I think that is going to be a going trend, I think.
Yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic. So if you think about companies that cannot operate remote, there are some that, I guess almost any company can nowadays, but there are some companies that, they're going to want to stay in their office building. Well, now in this new world, they have to have more square footage per employee. So does that create more demand for office space?
Maybe.
Potentially depending on how many, want to and have to stay in a corporate environment headquarters. But does that mean that they can pay for more?
Yeah.
So in the repositioning, I might need more space per employee, but I can't afford it.
Yeah.
So as the landlord and the owner of that building, how do you address that? So, there's going to be a lot of retrading and a lot of repurposing of properties, especially in the cities with what we're seeing happen. I'm really interested to see how this remote work environment, takes a long-term effect,
Yeah.
and what that looks like moving forward with companies, with people having to relocate, because that's, again, what's populating cities is people going there for jobs.
Yep.
If you take Google, Facebook, and all that out of Seattle and out of your area,
Yeah.
that's a big dent in the real estate market, why people are there.
Yeah, it's a big dent in real estate, but taxes. I mean, the Bay Area is toast. Just today, it might have been yesterday. I read it today. Google said they're extending their work from home until the summer of 2021. Right? I mean, and that's on back of, I always pick on Twitter because Jack Dorsey was the first to say work from anywhere. I think it's going to become a trend, right? They're testing it out. It's working better than expected. And oh, by the way, one of the things that made the valley is we would attract all these, graduate students and PhDs and all these folks, because this, then they would all live together in one house, like 10 people. Some of them would hit, some of them would miss. And then they're millionaires, and then they're buying $2 million houses in Palo Alto. That's not going to happen now. They're going to say, stay in Kansas, stay in Tennessee, stay in New York, wherever you went to college. Don't come here. That's the big change I see happening. And go ahead.
Yeah, and it's efficiency. So the market's getting more efficient. Businesses are getting more efficient, more profitable. People are becoming more efficient in what they do and how they do it. And the really interesting thing is the educational component. What we have seen now is education's not going to change. Kids need to go out and go to school and gather. Okay, colleges. You would think that there's a big push for online university. And people, it's not good. People don't want that. They still want to go get that college experience. It's more about the experience than the actual education. So that's interesting, is that, we're going to get a vaccine, we're going to get a treatment, all this, we'll be past this at some point, maybe next year, who knows? So once it's all done, things get back to normal somewhat. But it's really interesting how that environment actually is getting worse, not better, not more efficient from an educational standpoint, whereas the commercial world is getting better and more efficient, and people are embracing the remote atmosphere more so there than at the scholastic level, academic level. That's really interesting to me. Yeah,
you're right, and I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. The college experience is something you don't get online, right? This this is causing a lot of industries, and education is an industry, to kind of self-evaluate and see what it will be different after. And some will change, some won't. Maybe, education may be that one that, hey, we tested it, it didn't work. Because again, do you want to pay $50,000 a year? And I have no idea if that's the right number. I'm just guessing. 50 a year to go to Harvard, but you're online all day? Probably not, right? Part of going to Harvard is how big's your Rolodex when you leave Harvard, right?
Right. Yeah, it's having that harvard.edu.
Exactly. That lovely email address.
It is. That's what I tell people. Hey, go, people ask me, should I get my MBA or should I go to college? I'm like, absolutely. The network alone is worth more than the education and the value of it, to a degree. I mean, education is valuable. Don't get me wrong. And if you're, for people who have the aptitude and the resources to go to college, especially, at the graduate level and beyond, I tell them, do it. Do it now. Do it while you're young. It does give you a head start. The network is invaluable, and you can always work, and do internships and work in the career path that you're looking for along the way. But whoever's listening, if you have the aptitude and you have the resources, go to college, get your degree, get your MBA. It definitely has its advantages, especially right now. I mean, this climate, this environment, it's tricky, it's changing, and you want to have the tools in the education. You got to educate yourself one way or the other. I didn't go to college. I did very well, but it took me longer, and I had to educate myself, and I still do. So it's a little bit different. You went to college, you got the MBA, and different path. So I just wasn't wired that way, and that wasn't my aptitude. I don't learn well in that environment.
No, I agree with you. Education networking. Again, I went to a local university, Santa Clara University. I don't know, what is it? Probably 5 miles from where I reside right now, maybe 7 miles. But yeah, it was the network, right? Santa Clara University is and Stanford. Stanford obviously is a totally different tier, but yeah, those are the local universities that kind of make the Valley go. So that's why I chose it, right? I was never going to leave. So having that Santa Clara network, that EDU, is very important. The other thing I think that's interesting in this environment is there's going to be a lot of debt that goes bad or restructured or sold at a discount, right? There were a lot of great business plans put together the last couple of years that don't look so good today, right? And there are going to be people like you that come in with equity and kind of do workouts. And we're going to see that all over the stack. That's why banks are having huge credit reserves for bad debt. Any thoughts on how that unwinds? Because I think this will be a once in a lifetime unwind in bad debt, I think.
Yeah, so some companies just aren't going to make it. So there's going to be some again. So what the Fed has done and can do is they can provide liquidity. They cannot provide solvency. They can't make a bad business good. So those businesses, like I said, that were not efficient, that were not good businesses, that were surviving on momentum and just an overinflated economy, that were limping along pre-COVID, they're not going to be jacked up supported in here beyond, post-COVID. The only ones that the Fed's pumping cash into are the ones that are, too big to fail. The Boeings, some of the banks, companies like that. But these other companies that are marginal, that, are sacrificable, if you will, there's going to be some that are just going to get, just going to go out of business. I mean, look at some of the giant retailers that are just not relevant anymore.
Yeah.
Those are going to go away, get consolidated, get broken up into pieces, whatever. So a lot of these are just going to fail. The debt's going to get written off, and they're going to get liquidated.
Yeah.
So that's what's going to happen there. The companies that are salvageable and the businesses that can turn into better and great businesses down the road, then what you're going to see is you're going to see that workout situation. So you're going to see investors come in, and they're going to provide liquidity. They're going to provide other resources to bring those businesses, kind of like me, bring those businesses back to life. But the debt is going to get worked out and restructured, because I'm not going to come in and take over debt. Nobody's going to come in and take over debt. It's going to be like, whatever, I'll take the new path moving forward and recapitalize. Now, again, what the Fed has done is provide liquidity, not solvency. So the question gets asked now at the Fed level with the Fed's balance sheet, how is that unwound? How does that happen? Because the Fed's bought all these assets, right? And they bought them overinflated at exorbitant prices.
Yes.
How does that get unwound? Well, they just sell them for whatever they can get for them, and it gets written down. So the conversation on a global macro scale that everybody is having, so this is at the G8 level, what they're all doing around the table is, how much of a haircut are we all willing to take? That's what's going on. That's the conversation. So collectively at the global level of the governments of this world that owe each other money, there's going to be debt written down. At the, our level, the national level, there's a conversation going on between the Fed and Treasury and all of the central banks. How much debt, or, how much of this are we going to write down? At the local ownership level, that's going on inside of every real estate office owner, every local bank, how much of this debt are we going to write down? So those conversations are trickling down from the global level all the way down to the local regional bank in your community and that landlord, in terms of his portfolio. What are we going to let go of? What are we going to keep? So everybody's having this conversation about the haircut. So that's where opportunity is created. Because as these things get written down and written off and, liquidated off the books, there's got to be a buyer on the other end of all of those assets, for the ones that are salvageable. Now, there's companies that are just going to go away. But hard assets, real estate, equities, gold, things like that, as those things get liquidated, there's buyers on the other end that pick them up at pennies on the dollar and then move the ball forward. So that's where your opportunities are going to come from.
Yeah. So when you're looking at the landscape today, because you're already evaluating companies for investment, what are the things, are you just poking tires now? Or are you looking to put money to work in the next 3 to 6 months?
Yeah, I'm not doing anything until I know for sure we're done with COVID.
Okay.
Because look what's going on.
Yeah,
you know
what
I mean?
Yeah.
So you don't know who's going to be in business or out of business. The only thing you know is at the worst case scenario, grocery stores will stay open. Everything else will get shut down. So even restaurants. At a point, if this thing gets out of control and you can't control it at all, everything gets shut down. And then, then you reopen and it flares back up. So until we know we're done, I'm not comfortable with anything on a business level that cannot survive economic Armageddon. It has to be something that can survive in the worst possible shutdown scenario. And the only thing that is food, clothing and shelter. That's really it. And food means water, so food and water, you got to have a roof over your head. You got to have clothing, and you do have to have fuel to a certain degree, because goods still need to be, shipped. So there's going to be a certain amount of fuel that's going to be consumed and needed. So right now I don't think the real opportunities are there yet. I think there's still too much too much tolerance, for stress and for restructuring. So the real foreclosure waves haven't started. The CMBS market is, there's a lot of pain there. Mortgage market, there's a lot of pain there. We've got a lot of things happening this month with those unemployment benefits expiring / changing.
Mm-hmm.
We've got another round of the stimulus thing. We've got, the moratorium on evictions. They're going to renew that on a national level.
Yeah.
So I think, again, from a rent control standpoint, that's going to change all across the country in terms of moratoriums on evictions, rent controls, those types of things. So even in the housing, front, that's going to fundamentally change that. So I'm real curious to see what the election looks like, who's going to maintain control, and what these new rules and new laws are going to look like. Let's say Biden takes over, much more liberal agenda, than Trump being in there. Trump is, he's out there creating trouble with China and everybody, so there's real impacts to either one. And I'm not saying one is better than the other or right or wrong. I'm just saying, there could be some fundamental changes with an election year. So there's still a lot of things, especially as we get closer to the end of the year, that we really need to see how it all plays out before we get into next year, when all of these things start to happen, and we see the real repercussions of where we are economically.
So what I hear you saying, and again, don't let me put words in your mouth, but what I hear you saying, you're sitting on dry powder, you're watching and learning, constantly evaluating, but you probably don't see putting real meaningful capital to work until, I don't know, April, May of next year.
Yeah.
Roughly?
Whenever we're through all this, mainly the COVID situation, the election will be done. We'll understand what the guidance looks like there in terms of where you need to be, where you don't want to be, from an investment standpoint, based on the administration and the agenda.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as COVID goes, until that's gone, I'm not looking at anything meaningful. I'm doing little stuff in and out here and there, and I think housing is a great space, especially right now, development, but nothing huge, nothing big that requires multiple years of an outlook.
Got it. So short term infill things, 3-6 month in out makes perfect sense. Well, let's talk about the election. Again, let's not get political because we don't do that. But again, I think it's fair to say that one side is good for real estate, and one side, let's say good for real estate investing. Let's be specific. And the other side sees real estate investing as something that maybe has some loopholes that should be cut. Right. I think you saw that Biden, I think it was last week or it might have been the week before, brought up 1031 exchange, brought up depreciation, brought up a couple of things. So I think there's that side of the house that says, maybe real estate investing has enjoyed some things that we need to take away.
Yeah. So we have as you mentioned, we have a serious tax situation that cities, states, governments are facing right now. A lack of tax, lack of income has to be addressed. It's going to have to get addressed. So we're going to see, taxes rising, and, sales tax, property tax, all those types of things are easy ones to hit, in terms of, filling these holes and, plugging the holes, from what's going on here. So obviously from a liberal standpoint, yes, they have a more liberal agenda in terms of taxation and what they're going after and the loopholes that they're going to eliminate.
Mm-hmm.
The conservative agenda is more tax friendly, more investment friendly, more job creation friendly. Whereas, on the liberal front, it's more government, creating and doing those things. So, it's just real interesting. And Biden really hasn't put forward a complete plan other than all these different things that are just 3, 4, 7 trillion or something. I can't remember, all the different things that he's talking about. So it's really interesting that perspective and what can you really accomplish? Because I think if they win, if the liberal agenda takes hold and that's who ends up in office, I think they're going to control all aspects of government.
Probably.
And so you could see a wave where everything goes to the Democrats, which will create, it'd be interesting to see what happens. I just don't know what's actually possible when that happens. But it'll definitely be not a very friendly environment for business, not a very friendly environment for investors. It'll just be, it'll be a very prohibitive, economic environment. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, I think, and it's coming, right? They're not being shy, right? They're putting it out early. They're letting us know if it goes that direction. They're going to come after. I'm not going to get political. They're going to come after real estate investing because there are certainly tax things that they could change that make us pay more. There's just no question.
Yeah, they got it. You know, you have to get the dollars from somewhere. So you got
Yes.
to go after where it's created. And right
Yeah.
now, it's created in the markets. It's created in real estate. It's created, you know, in investment. You know, unfortunately, in a lot of those areas, that's what drives the ball forward, and that's what creates, you know, economic activity. So it's just a different viewpoint. And you know, at what level? You know, the billionaire tax. Anybody earning more than, you
Yeah.
know, so much pays exponentially more. So I mean, it's just so many different levels of what can be done. You know, it'll be interesting to see when a real agenda is proposed, what the real consequences are. Right now, it's all talk and speculation, so it's
Sure.
hard to say.
Yeah.
But what I do know for everybody, no matter who's in office, your taxes are going up
It
because
has
they
to,
have to. You know, even at the local level that the federal government is not even involved in. Your
for
local
sure.
city needs money, you know, so they're going to raise your property taxes to collect it, you know, to get it.
Yeah, there's no question. In California, I don't know if you've heard this, we have something called Prop 13, which basically has, allows you to keep your property taxes relatively low. Certainly, if you bought your
Mm-hmm.
properties years ago. I've been telling people that could be something that goes away, right? It's always been a third rail. It's been the things that get politicians not reelected when they talk about it. But there's not many levers to pull that would immediately raise revenue as fast as removing Prop 13.
Yeah.
And it would be detrimental because there's a lot of teachers and folks. I mean, I'll just use my mother as an example, right? She bought a house in 75, I think, 77, maybe let's say 77 for 30 grand or whatever it is. Her taxes before she sold were $300 a year.
Wow.
Her neighbor was nearly 30 grand,
Oh,
right? So she couldn't afford it, right? She never made, I don't know what she made, but she didn't make a lot of money. But yeah, if her property tax had been reset to anything close to 30 grand, she would have had to leave years ago.
yeah. And see, that's the delicate balance there that, you know, that will have to be struck, because if you start, I mean, if it gets so punitive, you know, that people can't afford to keep the properties, then that creates a whole nother, you know, wave of damage. So, you know, it's interesting, but, you know, there's things we have to watch. And then even in states that have no state tax, you know, are they going to now create a state tax to kind of catch up?
I just
You
thought
know,
about that
so,
with Vegas, right? Why does
mhm,
Vegas have no state income tax? Because of gambling revenue. Gambling revenue is down
right.
99%, folks.
They have
That's
to
going
do
to
something.
eventually be a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. They got to do something, you know? So, it's interesting times. It's very, and it's beyond my, you know, ability to understand, other than there's a huge gap that's got to be filled. You know, so, and
Well,
there will be
that's,
opportunities.
yeah,
So again, no matter what, you
yeah,
know, there's going to be
that's,
opportunities, and there's going to be a cost of doing business that you have to
yeah.
account for, and taxes are just part of it.
That is so interesting. I just finally put it all together in my head. That's exactly why you sit tight today, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
the rules could be changing, the taxes could be changing, and the opportunities have thus far been delayed. So I mean, there's no price discovery, nobody's taking haircuts
Right.
yet. All of these, eviction moratoriums and forbearance, and right, we're playing a game where the rules are changing, and we don't even see all the pieces yet. So you sit down and do
Yeah.
nothing.
Then I'll give you a classic analogy. So opportunity zone investments. So
Yeah,
when the opportunity zone vehicle was created, there was a lot of reluctance to invest because there was no guidance. So in terms of the IRS hadn't put out the, you know, actual details of how this all works and what the real rules are. And then there were several rounds.
yeah,
So it's kind of in that, you know, that was a great point to make there. You know, the reason I'm kind of waiting, and a lot of people I know are, is for those things, because we just don't know
yeah.
what the outcome is going to be. Now, again, this is for things that are more long term, like a company. And it's just like real estate development. I do not take down a piece of land and close until I got all of my approvals, all my permits. I know 100% for sure exactly what I can do with it.
Hmm.
Then I close. Same thing now. I'm looking at the economy as a development property. I can't close on it till I know exactly what I can do with it. So
I
I'm not
like
going to
that.
deploy anything meaningful or take any kind of risk until I know for certain exactly what the outcome is going to be and the consequences. And if you think about a business or a company, you know, anything can happen right now depending on the economy of the country, you know, as a whole, and what are your costs of doing business going to look like with a new administration, with the same administration, with a trade war with China? What if, you know, I mean, there's just so much going on all over the world right now. It's like, you know, it's very difficult to
Yeah,
project anything long term.
yeah. I think it. That image I just got nailed it right. We're real estate investing. Some people call it a game. It may be disrespectful, but if you call it a game, right now we don't understand all the rules. and we haven't been getting all of the pieces, and the game board is changing. So what do you do in that case? You sit down and watch. I think that's exactly right.
Or participate short term, in and out.
Yeah.
We know the real estate. We know the housing market's hot right now. We know that,
Yeah, flipping like last week.
Yeah, there's still a lot of opportunity right now. Multifamily is a great space right now. What's it going to look like next year? If there's a new liberal, control at all levels, state, federal, and trickling down, if it moves that direction to more liberal government, what is that going to look like? Because we know what the liberal agenda is for housing.
Yeah.
Free rent, no evictions. I mean, that's literally, what that agenda can look like,
Yeah, crazy. Well, man, this has been a lot of fun. I'm glad we talked about this, and it makes perfect sense. Opportunities are out there, short term, in and out, but the real big opportunities that recessions create is probably next year.
Yeah, we're not in a real recession yet.
Yes.
Okay, so recession technically defined as, economic decline over a certain period, right? That's the technical official definition of a recession. So from that standpoint, we're in one because, we shut the switch off. And we're going to see those numbers this week. They're going to confirm just how much damage was done, but it's forced. So it's very different. The real recession begins once virus is done and we start opening back up and we see what the real damage is when the government shuts the faucet off. Because once we get open, the faucet is going to get shut off and it's going to be like, right, let the chips fall where they fall. And that's where your winners and losers are going to be picked. The companies that are going to make it are going to make it, and then we'll have more guidance from the election and all that, what the future is going to look like. That's when the real, shoe drops for the economy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other thing that's important about, I love that point about this not being a real recession. Again, recession, GDP, all of that, technically we would call it, but incomes went up in this recession. How funny is that? That's not normal, folks. Incomes going up in a recession is not normal. So Greg is spot on. This is not normal. I think we're about to enter the realities of a recession here in the second half. So that's why that this whole notion of pain being delayed and we haven't really seen it yet is it's coming to bear, I think. Yeah. All right, man. Well, this has been fun. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.